Hello, welcome to a discussion about the future of sound work. My name is Joshua Leeds, and I'm a sound researcher, author, and educator. Today's session is entitled The Future of Sound Work, Sonic Activism. One of my most favorite things in the whole world is to be inspired, and today I have somebody with me who is inspiring me more than most people do. His name is Dayvin Hallmon, and before he could speak, Dayvin showed an awareness and love of music. At the age of 5, he began piano lessons. Later, he learned the clarinet and saxophone, and a few years later, he began studying the violin and viola. Perfectly at home in both gospel and Western classical music, Dayvin was assistant concert master of the Church of God in Christ International Orchestra for 7 years. Now, due to the unique musical lineage of Mr. Hallmon's teachers, he is a grandchild of Jascha Heifetz, Dr. Thomas Dorsey, and Dr. Mattie Moss Clark. Dayvin draws from these backgrounds and traditions for building ensembles in churches and helping congregations craft their musical ministry. Dayvin was born in Chicago and is currently a resident of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He is the founder and music director of the Black String Triage Ensemble. Their mission is using Black music and art to address pain, foster healing, promote love, call for justice, and guard against hopelessness. Aside from playing at the scene of shootings and sites of civil unrest to keep the peace, the organization also includes the Black Diaspora Symphony Orchestra. And in January 2023, Mr. Hallmon became the assistant conductor for Milwaukee's Concord Chamber Orchestra. Dayvin Hallmon, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for the conversation.
You're so welcome. Great. All right. So the Black String Triage Ensemble. I came across this a couple of years ago while I was doing research for a new book. And when I found out that there was a Black chamber ensemble or string ensemble that's mission was basically to go to sites where there had been violence and to play somewhere within the vicinity for the sole purpose of being able to keep things chilled out, cool, and as they say in their mission statement, to guard against hopelessness. Dayvin, tell me, when did you start this? What was your inspiration for the Black String Triage Ensemble?
The Black String Triage Ensemble had its very first rehearsal January of 2019. It was formed as a response to things that had happened in my life. For 10 years, I was an elected county official in Kenosha and departed about maybe 1.5 to 2 years prior to it basically being burnt to the ground. It was a very unkind place for certain folks. And I just got really fed up with that climate and just threw my hands up in the air and looked up to heaven and said, I just want to make art. And sometimes when we express a strong feeling to the universe responds back by challenging us and saying, if that's really what you want, then let me send you in a direction to move in to do something different. And the result of that is the Black String Triage Ensemble. I remember walking through my county board district one day, and a question was dropped in my spirit. What would happen if a bunch of string players showed up immediately after a shooting and didn't play Mozart? And the question just stayed with me. It just hung around me. And I got small pieces of the answer as I went through my daily activities. And so it got to the point that I was looking for a new job and was looking to leave Kenosha. And I left Kenosha, moved to Milwaukee, found myself unemployed shortly after moving to Milwaukee. And it was a situation of, well, this question has been placed in your spirit, and it hasn't left. And now you have all the time in the world to figure out what the answer is going to be and what that looks like. And so what you see today as the Black String Triage Ensemble is the result of picking up those breadcrumbs.
Great. And tell me, where was the first time that you brought your string ensemble out to a scene of violence, and what took place? And what did you learn?
So the very first crime scene that we played at was late May of 2019. It was actually two scenes that night. And the very first scene, we set up, we started playing. And as musicians finished and were packing up, a lady came over in her bathrobe with her hair wrapped up. And she introduced herself and said, I am the mother of the person who was shot, was my son. He's taken to the hospital. He will survive. She said, I will sleep better tonight knowing you all were here. Thank you. And we went to the second scene. The second scene was a bit more chaotic. The high schools had gotten out for the summer, so there were some teenagers twerking outside of a car right by the crime scene. There was a lady to the right side of the crime scene who had had a few drinks to start her weekend. And she sees me and the four string players that I've got, unpacking our instruments and such. And she says, you all need to be quiet. You're going to make too much noise. You're going to wake the baby. And I just sort of looked at her and looked over at the teenagers twerking opposite her and was kind of like, really, ma'am? You're worried about us making too much noise, but that's fine. Okay, whatever. Police officer who was working the crime scene saw the bass player's instrument and walks over and he points to the bass and he says, I play bass, but mine's in electric, not in acoustic. Who are you and what is this? And I start to tell him and he said, oh, I heard people at the station talking about this. I didn't know this had started already. He said, I'm glad you all are out here. Just be safe in terms of what you're doing. And then he walked away. Now, mind you, all of this is before we played a note at the second scene. So by the time we played and we got done and musicians are packing up, the lady who'd had a few drinks to start her weekend, she says, you all really blessed me. I don't have anything for you. I wish I had some water or some Sprite. I said, ma'am, that's not necessary. We're here for you. We don't need anything. We're here for you. Law enforcement, I noticed, they finished their investigative work at the scene shortly before we'd done playing, but they had stuck around until we got done and then left. And so I was in the car with one of my cello players and we pulled up to the traffic light. We're waiting for it to turn green. And to the left of us, a Milwaukee Police Department squad rolls up and they got their window down and they look over at us and they say, you all keep doing what you're doing, but just be safe out here. Glad you're out here. And then the light changed and they drove off. And I remember my friend Colin, who plays cello, looks over at me and says, did the Milwaukee police just thank us? I said, I believe they did, Colin. He said, you might be a genius for pulling this off.
Oh, great. So how you started in 2019 and now we're in 2023. How many of these crime incidents have you played?
Black String Triage Ensemble to date has played at approximately 40 to 45 different shootings. We don't go and ask questions. So the person may have gone to the hospital. They might have lived. They might have died. We don't always know the answer to that. In terms of civil unrest, I want to say we've played at about 2 or 3 actual and 2 possible sites of civil unrest.
Tell me about them. Were they riots?
In the case of Kenosha, we were out there on that Monday in August of 2020, which I believe was a day or 2 days before Kyle Rittenhouse took the actions that he took. We've a handful of people involved in Black String Triage who have ties to Kenosha in some way. And so for that reason, we thought it was a good idea to try to go down and use music to hold off the violence from occurring by anybody, civilian and law enforcement. To do that, we have a group called Legion of the Soul. They're a sister string orchestra, but they're not Black, not Latin. And they assist us primarily with riot work and occasionally with crime scene work.
And why is it that what have you found by having a mixed race ensemble as opposed to just a Black and Latin ensemble?
So it differs according to the environment. The city of Milwaukee is 70% Black and Latin. That is the bulk of who lives here. This is America's most segregated city. Arguably, and depending on where you read and where you look, the nation's poorest major city. This is also the city of Jeffrey Dahmer, and the frayed relationship between the folks who live here and the police department can still be felt. And the police, for the most part, the police department does not look like the city. So I say that to mean that when we show up, I am careful about who is there, because sometimes people in the neighborhood, if it's not people of color, they might feel a certain way. As one person put it to me last year when I had Legion of the Soul folk help us out with crime scene work, he said, "Well, you all don't understand. You can only empathize." And I looked at him, I said, "No, there are those of us that can understand completely." And then he said some other things, and I finally had to look at him and say, "Sir, I'm the one that called this. I'm the one that put this together. It was not the white folks' idea." And then he chilled out. You know, there's a difference between shootings and riots. In the case of riots, it's really everybody's work to stop that from happening, no matter who you are. I was very privileged, in a sense, when we went down to Kenosha, to have two white women who were both moms. And neither one actually lives down in Kenosha. She's a viola player, part of the orchestra down there. And another who has never lived in Kenosha, but their motivation was to say that this is not the world that I want for my children. And that as a mom, I am going to be the change moving this forward. And so I think that's commendable. Stopping a riot really is everybody's work. Shootings are a little more sensitive given the demographics in terms of where they occur, and who's involved. So I'm sensitive to that and to how people might respond based off of appearances. I mean, the fact that we show up with stringed instruments is slightly problematic already, because people assume we're going to play Mozart, and we don't. We only play composers of African or Latin descent spread across the genre. Could be blues, soul, jazz, gospel, classical. So yeah, there's little sensitivities just based on showing up into certain spaces that you have to kind of be aware of.
So, Dayvin, why strings?
So stringed instruments are the instruments that are the closest to the human voice. When you analyze the sound waves, they are almost identical to a person singing. Stringed instruments have a nimbleness to them in terms of tone, and in terms of energy that brass and woodwind instruments don't have. So it makes for a much more intimate feeling in terms of a space, and a much more heartfelt, direct communication musically.
And what is it that, now that you've done as many as you have of these appearances in environments that are pretty serious in what's going on? There's been violence. Somebody may have died. More than one person may have died. What is it that what is the stuff of music that you feel? What does the music accomplish in these environments when you're right in the heat of it?
For the people who are not directly tied to or related to the person who was shot, it gives them a sense of peace, a sense of calm. They know that they don't have to go to bed with this incident being the last thing on their mind. And my hope is even deeper than that. That you have a sense that what has occurred is not permanent, right? The incident may have gone down, but it's not forever. It's not the new normal. And even if it may be the normal, that possibility can birth itself for change.
And how do you feel that the music helps that birthing of change?
Um, that's a tough to answer.
Give it a
Uh,
shot.
I I don't want to speak for the people who live in the neighborhoods that we have played for because I think they're probably the ones that can better speak to that. I can say we played a scene this past Saturday. Somebody fired 5 rounds into a house, and about 3 houses down from where that occurred was a second grade girl who heard all of it go down. And she came out with her mom and I think their stepdad. Um, and the music helped her give a sense of calm, right? She was still able to laugh and to joke and to celebrate, um, to be a full human without having what occurred dim the light of her personhood.
Mm, mm. So when you use the terminology using Black music and art to address pain, foster healing, promote love, call for justice, and guard against hopelessness. Talk to me about guarding against hopelessness.
So the music is arranged according to the 5 stages of grief with the 6th stage of faith included at the end, not so much as a religious question, but more as a human one. If acceptance for all of us is not enough, there has to be something that convinces us that we can move forward, that whatever the situation was, that it won't occur again, or that it won't occur that way, or that different forces will intervene. There must be something that overwhelmingly compels us that the next moment will be different. And so the music is all put together, and the music program is designed with an eye and an ear towards that. Um, and you do the best that you can in terms of programming and choices, and hope that when you deliver it, that it does as intended.
Mm. And so, are you fully committed to the continuation of this manifestation of music as a balm, as something that makes a difference in the neighborhood? Do you think that this is? Would you imagine that this would be a model for other ensembles in other places around the world or here in America?
Uh, yes. I'd even go so far as to say this. There was a black orchestra administrator in Chicago I was talking to about this, and he kind of made me mad because he didn't get it. He said, "Well, you should really show up and ask the community what it needs." And I'm like, "Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. If you look in Black African American history, uh, there's a story where the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, in one of his marches, is met, as he was many times, by police with dogs and folks with fire hoses. But in one particular instance, he and everybody with him knelt down and sang,
Oh,
and they didn't stop, right? And the act of doing that was able to bring forth, to summon, to conjure something about the humanity of those that were in opposition, to keep them at bay. There is a quote on the wall of the African American Museum of Heritage and Culture, the Smithsonian Museum. And I'm gonna, hopefully I don't butcher this, but what it says on the wall, and I want to say it's from the Diary of John Corbett. And there's a woman in the slave hold, and she's moaning. And the person running the ship threatens to beat her if she does not stop, because the sound of her song is too much for his spirit to take. There is something about this for us as humans, that in times of great trial, in times of great tragedy, when we feel that we have nothing, when we don't believe that we can go on, that song is the only thing that we can use to summon forth a future for ourselves. The gun violence epidemic in America people used to say was relegated just to communities of color. That may have been true at the time. It is certainly no longer the case. It is all of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we are, concerts, movie theaters, churches, plays, going to the library, you name it. And so now this is something that we all need, all of us. It just so happens in terms of the demographics of Milwaukee and the way things are that this was designed in this way.
Yes. We are so lucky. We've got with us Dayvin Hallmon. He is the founder and the music director of the Black String Triage Ensemble out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They can be found at the online at the blackstringtriageensemble.org. And I have one other question before we're going to shift into the discussion about the future of sound work, of which I think that you have laid claim to an extraordinary example. I would like to know about the inspirational vision. I'd like to double back around to that took place for you and that you write about on your website, where you say asking someone to come to a concert hall or a church is like asking someone to come to your house. Not every person feels comfortable in every neighborhood or in every church. To have a concert outside is a community experience. A tragic event like a shooting of a person is always in some form a community experience. Would you like to pick up from there and talk about that?
I think a perfect example of this is the second grade girl who heard the cello for the first time because we so happened to show up after a very unfortunate incident that occurred a couple houses down from her. That was one of the questions I asked her before we left. Really, as musicians, we're not there to talk to anybody or be on a fact-finding mission. We did not have a chaplain with us because chaplains have full authority to talk to everybody. So people started engaging us as we tried to pack up and leave. And one of the things I asked the girl, I said, well, have you ever heard a cello before or seen one in person? And she goes, no. And her eyes got really wide. And I looked over at one of our musicians. I said, Autumn, get the cello out the case. And I look at the girl and say, you can go up, you can pluck the string. It's okay, right? So this is a family who probably has never been to Bradley Symphony Center, probably wouldn't go if invited, and probably, if they were, might say, well, why? For what? This has nothing to do with me. And so I think maybe as a byproduct built into this, we're string musicians showing up in the hood in the barrio. And one of the twisted things about America is that it has so many of us convinced that particularly folks of African descent in the United States don't play string instruments, that's not for us, that's not something that we did, when in reality, the South didn't have orchestras until after World War II. And prior to that, the folks that were providing music on the plantations were the enslaved. So they look like me, and we were using stringed instruments to do it. There is something criminal about this nation where you are a fixture of its history, and then we write you out of it and put you in a place where you think you have no relationship to it, when really it's just as much of your lineage as everything else around you. And so I say that because there are people who will not go to the concert hall. There are people who, maybe they want to hear music, but a church setting makes them feel uncomfortable. But by being present in front of your house, where all you have to do is stand on your lawn or on the driveway or, in front of the house next door, it removes those barriers so that you can have an experience in a place where you feel comfortable.
Yes. So what I'm hearing you say is not only do you bring something that is such a non sequitur into an environment where you've got police lines and you've got different ethnicities and you've got crisis going on. Somebody's been hurt. regardless of who's fired that gun, somebody has been hurt. And then all of a sudden, you guys are out there and you're playing a classically oriented set of music. And after 40 of these, the common thread of reaction that you are getting is what? Fill in the blank.
People are really thrilled and appreciative. The only time that it's quote unquote a problem is when we don't have a chaplain. And that is because there has to be somebody who's not one of the musicians. Like the chaplains help give us context, right? Some people in Milwaukee know who we are, so when we show up, it's a non-issue, but not everybody does. If you see us with a chaplain, you're more likely to look at the chaplain. Chaplain's going to say, this is who they are and this is what they do. Are you all okay? Do you need anything? Chaplain is not there to evangelize. The chaplain is not there to pray. The chaplain is simply there to be present with people in that moment. And that helps contextualize our presence in the space. So 99% of the time, people are, once we get done playing, people are thrilled. They're thrilled. Sometimes we actually have to stop them from trying to sing along because sometimes people are inebriated and think that they can have a song moment. And we're certainly not prepared to do that.
So in other words, here you are. I mean, it is. I used the word earlier, non sequitur. It's so ironic. I mean, you've got a violence taking place on a street, and then all of a sudden you've got 4 or 5 or 6 string players, and you're not there to provide the music for a party. You actually have got a whole other agenda that I read just a few minutes ago. I mean, about providing healing and about guarding against despair and bringing hope. I mean, these are very serious and sacred concepts. And then you've got a bunch of people that are saying, well, so-and-so just got shot, but we're having a party. I would imagine that this is a very, it's a duality, isn't it? The realities that are going on in that very small space.
Does it if I told you that the Milwaukee police like it.
Why do they like it?
So we don't really know, to be brutally honest. And as one of our associate chaplain, Reverend Molly DeReza, put it, she said, we'll just call it spillover positivity. And Black String Triage is not anti-police. We're not pro-police. We're stop the killing. You know, we certainly don't condone police brutality. It is a thing that happens. That's why riot work is essential in terms of what we do. I think of the concert James Brown had in the wake of the killing of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I want to say it was in New Jersey. And he had a concert. And things got a little testy at the start. And he told the audience, he said, whoa, 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 whoa. He said, now I'm doing this so they don't have to. And he pointed at the police and looked at the audience assembled and said, so can we handle this the way that we need to and keep them from being involved? And everybody said yes. And the concert proceeded. And he got a call from LBJ thanking him for saving the city from burning. So, you know, the Godfather of Soul has also shown us the way in this.
Yes. So, Dayvin, so you've been at this now since 2019, and you went through COVID with it, and now here we are in 2023. And I want to talk to you about sonic activism, the concept of sonic activism. And you and I had a brief conversation before we started to roll tape, and I asked you, I said, do you know what this term means? And you said, well, let me go ahead and look it up. And the reality is that what we're talking about is how is it that we show up now, you as an experienced man of taking music to the streets, literally, and to violent streets. When I talk about sonic activism, when I put those two terms together, I'm thinking, how is it that we use music and sound, music or sound, in situations where there's disruption, cultural disruption? And whether or not that's because of loss of homes due to global warming, or whether or not that's against the backdrop of social fabrics that are unraveling. The reality is, what do we do and how do we use our music? You have found a way to use music in violent aftermaths. And one of the things that I keep on looking for is, where is the relevance of music and sound when a culture, a neighborhood, a community is in a form of some kind of disruption? Have you any thoughts? I mean, now you and I are just in total dialogue land, right? And this is not based upon the Black String Triage Ensemble, but it's based upon the fact that you're a musician who is the living epitome of a sonic activist. You're using your music to do something to help out. And I'm wondering, have you got thoughts? Have you got any advice that you might share with other people who have been trained to help other people out, but usually in a hospital? And now we're saying, well, you better get out of the hospital, because where the people are going to need some help are going to be in the neighborhoods. What do you think?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that, but I think I know. I think I know how I want to answer it.
Go for it.
So I have been listening to Maestro Sergio Celibidache, who is long dead. But he has a very interesting philosophy regarding music. And he says that music is not about beauty. You know, it's not about all of these things that we bring to it. That art really is about freedom. And that with music, we have the ability to take the human mind that is constantly bouncing from one thing to the next every single instant. We're never fixated completely on one thing all the time. We're always bouncing from one thing to the next. But with music, we're able to take all of these different sounds, like in a symphony orchestra, stack them on top of each other. They have color, they have weight, they have shape, they have density, they have texture, they have all these dimensions, and we're able to comprehend them in an instant of less than a second. And so he says that, particularly in terms of music, that it is about freedom. It is about the ability to liberate ourselves from the conventional human trappings that we all have on Earth, no matter who we are, of a mind just constantly doing this. And so I think wherever the need is of a person or people to channel and to have that experience of a singular nature is where work needs to happen. I'm in a public school setting, and a lot of the behavior stuff is around social, emotional things. Kids flipping out because the Chromebook isn't a touch screen, or, you know, maybe it was a parental issue. You know, somebody's being tugged back and forth between mom and stepdad, and maybe neither mom nor stepdad necessarily want the kid, and the kid feels that. We can do a lot more in terms of bringing people's minds, bodies, and souls in sync, utilizing music. Those frayed edges that occur from the tragedies of life that leave us, I don't want to say, I'll say that leave us fragmented. How do we restitch ourselves together? Music is the way that we do that. I'm surprised we haven't done more in terms of veterans reentry. We know that guitars for vets, creative writing for vets, composition for vets, piano for vets is extraordinarily helpful. We know this from the veterans themselves doing it. And the psych studies. Why do we not have a deliberate arts reintegration program when we bring people back who have been out fighting wars? You know, why is there no commitment to saying for every dollar we spend on the war, we're going to commit 50 cents, a dollar, $2 to the arts and troop care so that we have folks that are whole human beings. So I think those are the places that are fertile ground for work, to begin and to continue.
Dayvin Hallmon, the founder and director of the Black String Triage Ensemble, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is a good place for us to stop. I know that usually you take 2 or 3 times as long you shared with me, but I think that you have given us some great thoughts, some wonderful things to think about, and some challenging things to think about. Inspiration is the name of the game. I am totally and completely inspired by the work of Dayvin Hallmon. The blackstringtriageensemble.org is where you can find more information about them. If they happen to inspire you, maybe you might create something along the same lines. Maybe you might go ahead and create something that is different, but that still comes from the same birthplace, which is, as Dayvin has said and has quoted, art for freedom, spillover positivity. I'm really delighted to have spent this time with you today, Dayvin. Thank you so much, and all the best of luck to you. And everybody here, everybody take good care. Be safe. Bye-bye.